In this video, what I want to cover is how to create a level of detail objects based on the distance of the camera compared to the objects. Pretty much the same workflow as you would do in a game, where the closer the camera, the high resolution the object will be. But what I want to do is I want to be able to do that straight inside of the viewport of 3ds Max. In Max, there is a level of detail tool called level of detail here, but this level of detail is only used at render time, and it's pixel based, and it's going to use different objects at render time. But what we want to do is we want to avoid using this level of detail tool. We want to be able to see that interactively in the viewport. So in order to do that, I'm going to use Flight Studio, and Flight Studio is now part of Max since Max 2009. So it's a very helpful tool for OpenFlight import and import, but we also have the tool inside of Flight Studio that allows us to do a level of detail straight in the viewport for 3ds Max. So what we'll do to start with, I'll go into the creation, primitive creation. I'll create our teapot. I'm going to make it very low resolution to start with. I'll just copy this one, just make it a clone and make it a copy, and I'm going to make this one higher resolution here, and that's going to be our high-res teapot. I'm going to name that teapot high res, and I'm just going to select the other one and name it teapot low res so that we know which one they are. And to combine with this, I'm just going to create a small sphere that I'm going to put inside there and pretty much align it center to center. And I'm going to make that sphere very, very small, like that. That's going to be our low resolution object here. And did I align that correctly? Center to center, and apply, and okay. So now that we've got our three objects, and I'm going to call that low res proxy. Here we go. So that's our three objects. Now we want to be able to switch based on the distance from the camera. So the first thing we need to do, we need to define the level of details. So I'm going to go in Utilities, and I'm going to go here in More, and one of them here is called Flight Studio. So I'm going to click OK, and it's going to bring in the Flight Studio interface. So you see that we've got more detail, less details, but we haven't configured anything yet. So we need to configure the level of details. So I'm going to open the Modify Hierarchy Attributes, and as you can see now we've got the scene root, and it has certain properties for OpenFlight. We don't care about that. We're not too interested into the OpenFlight part of this. We're only interested in the LOD detail. So you see that we've got a couple of objects here. And inside of OpenFlight hierarchy, they're considered to be faces, but we don't care about that. That's not what we're interested in. What we want to do is we want to create LOD. So if I go here and create, you see that one of them is called LOD, and I'm going to select the scene root because this is where I want to create this LOD. I'm going to create a first one, a second one, and a third one. So now we've got three levels of details. This one here, so we've got the distance, minimum and maximum, for all of these level of details. What I'm going to do with this one here, I'm going to say between distance of 0 and a distance of, and I'm just going to use generic value here, let's say 100. I'm going to use this level of detail. Then I'm going to use the second one, and I'm going to say from distance 100 to distance 200, you're going to use that level of detail, and for distance, you guessed it, 200 to maximum distance here, we're going to leave it like so. So from 0 to 100, it's going to be this level of detail. From 100 to 200, it's going to be this level of detail, and this one here from 200 to, let's say, infinity, that's going to be that level of detail. So now those are just containers of level of detail. So what we want to do, I want to grab the proxy, and I'm going to drag it and drop it in the higher number here. I'm going to draw the highest resolution here inside of the first one here, and the medium resolution, and we're just going to bring that here. So now when we are very close to the object between 0 and 100, it's going to be the high-res version here that's going to be shown. When we're going to be here between 100 and 200, it's going to be our teapot low resolution, so kind of a medium resolution mesh. And here, when we are very far away, so 200 and infinity, we're just going to use a proxy, just a proxy here. So now this is set up. I'm going to close that down, and we're going to see how it works inside of the viewport. Right away, I can go and say, I want to see the least detailed version. So you see that this is the sphere, and I can increase by pressing more detail. It's going to go to the low res proxy, and not the low res mesh, and then to the higher res mesh. And I can reduce the detail up to the proxy. So now we've got our setup done, but we don't have any reference. We don't know how to set up this. So we don't know how to connect it to a camera. So to do that, what I'll do is I'll just open the Max Script Listener. I'm just going to clear that. I just practiced this presentation before. There's a command inside of Flight Studio, a script command called Flight Studio dot set LOD distance. And I'm just going to put a space and just say 100.0 here. So if I execute this by pressing enter, you see that we've set up the distance to be the distance of reference currently in the viewport. So it means that if we go here, this is between 0 and 100, so it's going to use the higher res version of the mesh. So if we get a bit further, maybe 150.0, and I'm just going to copy this here and paste it. You'll see that it's going to use the lower res mesh, and then I'm just going to go here and say, I don't know, 500.0, and it's going to use the proxy. So that LOD distance can be set by a script like so. Of course, we don't have a camera inside of the scene yet, so what I'll do is I'll create a target camera. I'm just going to orient it towards the middle so that it always point towards the middle like so. And I'm going to grab that camera here, and oops, my mistake, sorry about that, Shift Z. I pressed the wrong button. Anyway, so I'm just going to go back to the top, front, and left view here. Okay, here we go, and I'm going to set up the camera to be looking at the object. So if I move the objects around in the top viewport here, what I want to do is as I get closer, I want the object to change to higher resolution. So I need to know the distance between the camera and the actual object. To do that, I'm going to add a expose transform modifier. Just put it in anywhere in the scene, and that's just a helper. We're going to call that expose transform teapot. And what I want to do is I want to know the distance between the two objects. So I'm going to grab the camera here. I'm going to turn off parent, and I'm going to just grab the teapot here. So now this expose world transform helper will know the distance between those two objects. So what I can do now, go back at the bottom here and just use the M key, and the M key means copy the actual parameter to the as a Max Script command to the clipboard. So if I press M, you'll see that if I go back to my Max Script Listener, if I press V here, it's going to show me expose transform underscore teapot.distance. That means that it gives me access to the distance at all time. So now if I copy this here and just paste it here like so and execute this, you said it's going to set up the distance correctly. So now the distance is 243, so that's far away. So I'm going to copy this again, and I'm going to go inside of the top viewport. I'm going to go a bit closer, and if I do execute that command again, you'll see that now we get the high-res teapot. So we want that to be interactive. So as I move the camera, I want that to be fully interactive. To do that, there's a command in Max that allows you to trap any change in a modifier or an object. So it's the when command. So I'm going to go when parameters. So any parameters of the exposed world transform. So I'm going to copy this one here. Whenever a parameter changes in this modifier or this dummy object here, do this. So set flight, just set the flight studio or update it. So what's happening now is that as soon as this is changing, so the distance is changing, it's going to set the teapot distance as the flight studio distance, and it's going to be until the scene is closed. So I'm just going to press enter to this. You see that it created an event handler. I'm going to close that down, and now if I move the camera, you see that if I'm very close to it, it's high res. I move further away from it, and then we're going to get to the proxy like so. And all of these values can be adjusted. So if I don't want that to be this way, I can go back to the flight studio, and in the level of details here, I can adjust the maximum and minimum distance depending on when I want that to be changed from one LOD to another. So that's how you can create interactive LODs inside of Max Viewport.